statements from the candidates in a couple minutes after we finish the rest of our announcements. And then after that, we will go to questions that were submitted in advance via email to Perva at the chamber office. And then we will go to any questions that were submitted here tonight. And again, if somebody, as the forum is going, suddenly says, I got a question. It's not. Are you on?
Can you hear me? Oh, they were on before.
We're on. We had volume for a bit. Okay, I'm just going to project my voice then. So if you do have a question you'd like to ask, just again, go grab a card and get that, and we'll get that up here. And
So then we would like to remind the public that the views expressed during this session are those of the individuals making the comments, not those of the Little Falls Area Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. This event is part of the Chamber's effort to educate and connect area residents and businesses. So first, we will all stand and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
all right, so we're going to start first with opening statements from our candidates. They will have 2 minutes, and we are going to start down at the end and work our way this way. So we will start first with Greg.
Good evening. Mics aren't working, so I'm just going to try to talk a little bit louder. Good evening. I first want to thank the Chamber and the Tourism and Morrison County for having us here today. I think it's a great opportunity have everybody see what's going on. My name is Greg Hendrickson. I am the endorsed DFL candidate for House 5B, which is the township, or the towns of Staples, Wadena, Motley, and Long Prairie. I live south of Long Prairie. I'm a United States Army veteran. I have a business degree, decades of business. I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. I'm running because of my experience in 1979 and 1980 in South Korea. I lived in that country when they were going through their coup. I saw firsthand what the result in a country will do to not only the economy, but also the civilian population, and it was devastating. Thousands of civilians died. When I saw what happened in our nation's capital on January 6th, I had to get involved one way or another. I have a vision for the state. I feel strongly that every Minnesota should not just be getting by, but also given the hope of getting ahead. I am happy with all of my endorsements I have gotten throughout my campaign so far this year, but I'm extremely grateful for my endorsement of the Independence Party of Minnesota. So I've been endorsed by the DFL and the Independence Party. This cross endorsement is a testament for my ability to work with all parties in a great state of Minnesota. I will always work towards the best possibilities, morally and economically, for all my district, and everybody will have a seat at my table. As always, when we work together as neighbors, we can achieve great things. Thank you.
And next we will go to Mike.
Thank you. And thanks for this event. Thanks for the chamber. Thanks for everyone being here. This is one of the cornerstones of our government is people involved. You know, we're lucky to have forums like this where we get to express our viewpoints and we're not standing out in a soapbox in the middle of the cold weather. So we're truly blessed. So myself, I'm Mike Wiener. I grew up south of Long Prairie. We have a family of 9. My wife and I have 9 kids together. I got involved in politics because I wanted to have a better future for my kids. I looked at how things are changing, not just our state, but in our country, and said, the words of my dad came back to me, if you can't complain too much if you don't get involved. And I said, now's my time. So I decided to run. It's been a learning experience. So many of the things that I experienced through the last two years of the trifecta have really been eye-opening. The one side of government, one party control has been detrimental to our state. And it's going to be very difficult to bring some of those things back, but to bring back that voice of rural Minnesota, which was really trampled on in the last 2 years. So with your help, I would like to represent the people of 5B for another 2 years. I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
Greetings, fellow Americans and the great state of Minnesota. Thank you for this opportunity. My campaign is built on 5 pillars: economic development, affordable housing, affordable health care, habitat, clean water, and education. These pillars are all interconnected. You can't address one effectively without considering the others. And I'm also a woman. I have I'm getting tongue-tied here. I have a unique blend of experiences as a mother, a businesswoman, an athlete, a hunter, and advocate to my leadership approach. And what I want to say truly to my fellow Minnesotans is we stand at the dawn of a new era of economic growth and opportunity. In the past few years, we've seen job growth, wages are rising above inflation in our rural areas, benefiting from targeted tax incentives. This is a sign of progress, but it's just the beginning. As we embrace this economic momentum, it's essential that we ensure this progress is sustainable and inclusive for all. That's why I fully support key initiatives like the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the American Rescue Plan. These laws are already helping to control inflation, create jobs, and bring much-needed relief to hardworking families across our state. But we can't stop here. We need to go further to protect our economy and uplift our communities. It's time to provide real tax relief for middle-class families, support small businesses as the backbone of our local economy, ensure access to affordable housing and health care for everyone, invest in education and mental health services for our children. As your state representative, I will fight for policies that build a stronger and more equitable Minnesota. Together, we can create a state where everyone, no matter where you live or what you do, has a fair shot at success. In this land of freedom and opportunity, let us embrace this new chapter with unity and determination. Together, we can create a state where everyone...
Time. Sorry. Yes, sorry.
All right. Thank you.
We're going to try not to do that, but, you know, if you do hear one of us say that, then sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I'll save it for the end.
So thank you, and thank you to the fellow candidates up here, and to the committee that put this together in the chamber. So my name is Ron Krisha. I am running for 10A for re-election. And as we look ahead to what's going to happen after the Tuesday election, we really have to get into governing. We're going to have a new budget, and at the state level, it's looking at the November forecast and whatever the February forecast. Our number one job will be to put a budget together, and we don't frankly know what that looks like right now. We're coming off of some very high and record spending that have tails that go in the future, and we're going to have to see what those effects are. We're already hearing schools looking at their budgets. We're already seeing this roll down. County governments are looking at what's in front of them. We just simply don't know yet what we're going to have available. And so I'm looking at this with many of the initiatives that we tried to work on coming out of the last session. Rural EMS. We know that our rural emergency services is hurting. We know that our nursing homes are in dire straits. And that really is going to be at the forefront of what we do. At the same time, when you look at the budget and what's coming in on the revenue, right now the last budget report shows that we're seeing revenue coming in on the income tax side, but not so much on the sales tax. What that tells me, and we'll see what we get through in the holiday season here, is that people are pulling back on the spending. The uncertainty is too high. People may have money, we'll find out, or they may have wages, but they don't know what tomorrow looks like. And until we put a budget together and bring that uncertainty away from them, we're really not going to know what's going to happen over the next 2 years. So I think my number one priority will be looking at the things that we didn't do. Let's get the money for rural EMS, let's do nursing homes, and continue the broadband push, and then see what it's going to look like for the state budget. I think a Social Security tax is in order, tax break,
and looking at property tax reductions as well. But we have to see what we have for spending and what we have for budget. So that's that's a pragmatic approach that I'll be taking as I go into the next session if I'm elected.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Isaac Schultz. I am the state representative for House District 10B. My wife, Julia, and I are raising our son, Theodore, between Upsall and Swanville, which is where my family has lived for the last 150 years. I'm exceedingly blessed to live here in this prosperous, faith-filled community, and I want to see our future generations be able to thrive right here. And I'm excited to be on the stage sharing this opportunity to talk about the future of our state. And when I look at the state of Minnesota, we do have a lot of challenges, but it's not a challenge from government, or a challenge for government, I should say. It's a challenge for the middle-class Minnesota families across our state and across our district who are dealing with the rising costs of gas and groceries and energy prices and healthcare costs. And the reason that we're dealing with those things today is because government has gotten far too out of line and intervened in ways that is very unhelpful to family budgets. During the last 2 years, where the complete Democrat control of state government resulted in huge tax increases, $10 billion worth of new tax increases, and things that are going to make it even more expensive for so many Minnesotans to afford. I really think because a lot of these tax increases haven't even been fully implemented yet, that we haven't seen the worst of inflation in our state, and it pains me to say that. It's my view that government needs to be right-sized, that we need to look at our state government and focus upon needs rather than wants. And there were far too many wants that were passed during these last 2 years that frankly are far too expensive and burdensome for Minnesota families as we move forward. So for me, I am going to continue to represent this community as a conservative, someone who is faith-filled, and I'm excited for our conversation tonight.
All right, thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. So now we'll move on to the questions that were submitted in advance. And this first one is a bit long, and it's got 3 parts, so we'll be happy to repeat it as we work our way down the line for everybody. And this question is veterans related. And the first part is, will you support Guard and Reserve burial equity? The second part is, will you support the disabled veterans property tax exclusion? And the third part is, will you support language related to hunting and fishing licenses for disabled veterans? And yes, we will gladly repeat that as we work our way down the line. So we'll start on the first, down in the end with Greg.
I've got more than 2 minutes of answers here. But to answer the question, yes, I'll support all 3 of those. I think they're great for veterans. I'm a United States Army veteran myself. I've been endorsed by a group called Vote Vets. It's 1.5 million veterans in the nation. They are nonpartisan. They do not endorse parties. They endorse candidates alone. And I've been endorsed by them. They have my back. I will have the veterans' backs. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the question. There's a lot to unpack here, and there's some things that should be discussed. This is something that you learn as you go through this process. We have a debt that we have to owe to our veterans that have served our country, and that is a huge ask for anyone, especially if they're wounded. When we have something like a tax exclusion, and this is something that I hadn't really considered about, your property taxes would have to get picked up by somewhere else. If there's an exclusion for one, someone has to pick up that debt. Now, does that fall on the shoulders of the county then? Or would that fall on the shoulders of the state? So there are some questions that have to be answered there. I'm in favor of this, but going through the process, we'd have to figure out exactly where that burden would fall. Because if there's exclusion for a veteran, then, like I said, who's picking up the tab, the leftover balance? And property taxes has been explained a lot of times, it's been compared to a pie. So if the county's looking at the fund as a pie, as a whole, and each of these pieces are coming out from different places, if there's an exclusion for one, it has to come out of another place. So with that being said, there would have to be some estimates or some calculations as to who would pick up the exclusions for the disabled vets, but it is something that I'm in favor of. Thank you.
Could you repeat? I mean, I got the one about the tax exclusion. but
Sure.
The burial, what?
Yes, it's the Garden Reserve Burial Equity is what it's known, is what it was, how it was submitted to us.
Okay.
And then the third one, again, was the language relating to hunting and fishing licenses for disabled veterans.
Well, I would support all three, again. Forgive me, I'm a new candidate. I don't understand the nuances, as Mike was talking about, the details of the burial equity and how we would, allocate for that. Property tax exclusion for vets, I would support that. I mean, I'm also in support of that for considering seniors when it comes to Social Security and so forth. That would save them money. Hunting and fishing, I don't know what that language is, but being a hunter myself, I'm all for disabled people being able to get out there and enjoy what everyone else is able to enjoy. The primary, I don't want to say, the primary overture is that this is costing and spending of money, where in actuality, this is investing. This is investing in our veterans and their well-being and their futures. And when you invest, you get a return on investment down the line. We hear a lot of talk about short-term spending and all the, we got to cut. It's about investing so that you invest in the right places with the right management, and it does return an investment, but it's a long-term investment. And you'll see that not only in the well-being of your communities, but in the balance sheets of your townships, your cities, your profit and loss statements. That will show up. Those qualitative values that are invested in show up long-term in the community. And so, time's up. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for the question. So the first thing, I have no problem with the veteran support. In fact, pretty soon, you're going to be going to the military museum that's going to be built, and that'll be finished here. And that was a large part of the push that I made that happen. I'm very proud of that. So as I back through that, and on the burial equity, we've already passed a House resolution that I authored to help push that through. So we already have taken a position that we want to fix that. On the other two things, absolutely my answer is yes. And I'll just simply say the new cannabis legislation is the law of the land, and I would take the first dollar of revenue to that and start putting it towards these two so that we have the revenue to support both of these.
Since we've had a lot of discussion on this, on each of these topics, I'll just say that I do support all of them, and we can move on to the next question.
Okay, so the next question is, can you please explain why there is the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund renewal on the ballot? And where do you stand on this extension? Mike, we will start with you.
Glad you asked the question. And I think there's a lot of confusion as to how that's written up on the ballot. You have to wonder if that isn't specifically done for that reason. Any constitutional amendment should be clear, should be concise. This constitutional amendment is not that way. It does not explain everything or how things are going to function with this constitutional change. That is a dangerous thing. We discussed constitutional amendments on the floor of the House, and there's actually a reason to make them vague. And that's because you can do many more things with that. There's more ambiguity. It's dangerous. The amendment, or the system as it works right now, has to be renewed every 10 years, and the legislator is responsible for deciding where the money goes. This constitutional amendment would take it to a 25-year extension and would take the legislators out of the equation. So if there's money being spent and the people themselves, their voice is no longer in control of how that's done and a bureaucracy is put in place, that to me is the wrong way to do this. The other aspect of this is right now that fund can be used for water in municipalities, cities, and so forth. With this constitutional change, it takes that out of the equation, and that money can no longer be spent for that. A fund that is specifically for clean water, you would think would be used for drinking water as well. This is the problem with this constitutional change. It is not clear, takes it out of the legislator's hands, because right now you can talk to your legislator and say, why did you vote for this? But if it's in the hands of a bureaucracy appointed by the governor, you lose the voice of the voters. So I am against this constitutional amendment for those reasons. Thank you.
Julia, you're up.
I'm all for the Environment and Natural Resources Amendment 1. And so what we're trying to do is provide an opportunity for other organizations, maybe smaller organizations, that are more community-led and focused, grassroots, to be able to access a tiny amount of this money and hopefully then grow to be able to participate in the full, what's called the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, which is a group of legislators and citizens that makes up funding recommendations to the legislature that use the trust's money. So through this process, it's allocated $1.5 billion to more than 2,600 projects since founding in 1963. This would extend the dedication of revenue from the state-operated lottery to the Environmental and Natural Resources Fund through December 31st, 2050. This increased amount of money that can be spent from the fund each year from now 5.5% to 7% of the fund's market value. And it also creates a grant program to provide funding for projects related to addressing environmental issues in affected communities, environmental education, and natural resource conservation. The amendment would repeal language that authorized loans of up to 5% of the principal of the fund for water system improvements and would add language to prohibit the use of funds to repay the principal or interest of any bonds or any costs related to the construction.
So when this came to the House floor, I did not vote to move it forward. And that was because I don't believe there was enough debate on it. It was a 25-year period, and I think that the devil is on the details on this one. But that was my House floor vote. That was what's on record, and at this point it is now in front of the voters, and the voters are going to have to do their due diligence. So I don't tell people how to vote on the constitutional amendment because that's their civic duty, and I'll leave it there.
I think the original question stated something to the effect of why is this on the ballot? And for you all to know, the reason that this is on the ballot this year is because when this was originally passed 24 years ago, it was set up with a sunset of 25 years. And so we have reached that point in time where we are asking the question of Minnesotans, do you continue to support this? Is this something that you see as valuable with the lottery dollars and 40% of those going towards these conservation projects? That's why it's on the ballot. Now, if for whatever reason the initiative fails, that will come back to the legislature and it will be debated and discussed. I share a lot of the same concerns talked about by my Republican legislative colleagues in terms of the way that they set up this constitutional amendment, how it's ambiguous, and in addition to that, the details and the way that it's going to be changed to limit the ability, especially for small rural communities, to be able to access those dollars for water infrastructure projects. And so this isn't the right path for us to be on, and it's a big reason why I did not support it either.
I hate to be the last guy on the question, but anyways, I'm gonna speed this up. I do support this. I do spend a lot of time in the great outdoors, and I don't want to ever lose the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then we'll now move on to our next pre-submitted question. And then Julia will be going first. The question was this: the state of Minnesota spent billions of dollars of what was our surplus money. People say they are struggling. Why was this done?
Find my notes. Well, primarily, there again, it's the overall, what do I say, premise or belief is that when you invest, you get a return. Now, to support economic growth, now I've lost my train of thought here. For instance, that money went to several programs, including school lunches and early learning scholarships, tuitions, family paid leave, affordable housing, the homeless, bonding and infrastructure, and the list goes on. And we spent $400 million on school lunches, and that's this money is over 2 years. This is not dedicated money. But for instance, the school meals cost us $400 million. That's what we invested into those school meals, and that's over 2 years, and that helps approximately 820,000 children. That saves families roughly $1,800 per student each year. That's the cost of, the tax cost is the cost of a Happy Meal at McDonald's. These programs save money, and it improves the health and quality of our communities. We all want good nutrition for our kids, and without it, we're endangering our kids' physical, emotional, and social health. Now, I want to start with also explaining that economics, and when deciding these kinds of programs, finance is economics in action. When you invest, let's say, okay, we've got a qualitative side and we have a quantitative side. Your qualitative side is your community, your people, your farmers, your small businesses, and so forth. And over here is your quantitative, your towns, your balance sheets, your P&Ls, and so that investment returns. I don't have any statistic to give you, but it returns. It's not money spent, and it's a sunk cost.
Julia, we're going to have Ron go now. Thank you.
It's spent. It's an investment that returns money, saves you money.
So the question, as I heard it, was, why did this happen? Well, we had no balance. It was all one-party rule. The Democrats, the majority party, had both the House, the Senate, and the governor. And they got to write the budget, and that's what we have. I would not have done what they did. I would have changed that. I would have put more tax breaks in. I would have changed some of those and looked out into the future, because a lot of it was one-time funding with future commitments. So coming into this, that's why I talked about earlier, we're going to have a November and a February forecast. We're going to have to deal with the consequences of that budget. Some of those programs I think people would agree with and say they were good ideas, but they come at a cost. Right now, I have people coming to me saying, why didn't we have rural EMS fixed? Why didn't we get Social Security tax breaks? Why didn't we get this? Well, the reality is we could have done that. I'm hearing from teachers talking about their pension. The money's not going to be there. It was there, but it was chosen to go to different places with priorities. You can only spend $1 once. And so at this point, we're going to be forced to deal with whatever those consequences may be. And every dollar that was spent on a one-time program, those aren't one-time program. They have ongoing costs. We've hired people. Government grew at a rate faster than our private businesses in Minnesota. Those will have costs. So I really, it doesn't matter which side you're going to be on. You're going to have a government budget when whoever the legislature comes together in January, and you're going to have to look at what those consequences will be. Maybe they'll be great. Maybe everything will be fantastic and we'll have a surplus. I don't think so, because as I'm looking ahead and I already see the income tax revenues being higher than the sales tax, I think our spending is going to slow down and we're going to be left with a deficit. So, but I could be wrong, but the answer to the question is why? Because one party got to write the budget and there was no balance. And frankly, those of us that were serving were largely left out of those discussions.
Looking back at it, you may recall that we had a nearly $20 billion budget surplus. And then it all changed because of the complete Democrat control of St. Paul. In the 2022 election, the Democratic Party, from Governor Walz on down, campaigned upon delivering $2,000 rebate checks to families across the board. That's the biggest broken promise potentially in the state's history, because families haven't seen hardly any of that money back in their pockets. And instead, it was a fraction of that. It was, for some people, not all people, for some people, it was 1/8 of the $2,000 rebate check that they were promised. In addition, they promised to deliver the full repeal of the tax and Social Security, and they failed. And instead, they bloated government. They added 3 new state agencies. They added 2,000 new state employees that you and I are going to have to pay for years to come, until we're able to right-size this budget and put it back with the priorities of the people of Minnesota. Our long-term vision for Minnesota should be a more competitive Minnesota, one that competes very well with the other upper Midwest states. But frankly, we are on an island. Every other state around us is moving in the direction or has completely eliminated their taxes on their income taxes. And here in Minnesota, they raised income taxes. Here in Minnesota, they are making it more and more unaffordable through the tax policy with complete Democrat control of St. Paul. We have one choice this election. It's to restore balance and to restore sanity and common sense so that Minnesota family budgets can thrive.
I'm all for balanced budgets, but with all the negativity on here tonight on this subject, there's some good stuff that came out of this. School lunches for all, tremendous, very popular in this state, regardless. Child tax credits, very popular. We have to help these young families, and we should be putting more budgets there. More tax credits for young families. In District 5B, there's 2,400 students, roughly, give or take a few. That's 4,800 lunches a day that are being served in our kids that these families don't have to struggle to come up with the money for. And I'm going to end on that. Thank you.
There's been a lot of points brought up that very much agree with. The $2,000 tax money back to the citizens was something that was a campaign promise. Our governor said he was going to fight to make sure that money came back to the taxpayers. You got $265 back, and most of that was going to be taxed. That's an issue.
It was not taxed.
Thank you for interrupting. Long-term government spending on one-time money. I mean, anybody in business knows that you cannot spend more than you're taking in. This isn't rocket science. It's not hard to figure out. But what this comes down to, and you really have to boil it down to its basic things here. Who knows better to do with your money? Who knows better to do with the money, your income? You or the government. That's simply what it comes down to. Free lunches sounds great. But we have to ask the question, why aren't families able to afford their kids' lunch? Very basic question. If you can't afford to put food on the table and you're working a job, you have to look at either the spending in the household, but you also have to look at how much money of your paycheck is getting taken out every single paycheck. It was said at one time that you cannot balance, or if government takes over about 15 to 20% of your income, we're on the road to a crash. Right now, about 40 to 45% of your paycheck is going to government spending. It's going to taxes. Unsustainable. Now put on top of that 20%, give or take by some estimates, with inflation. The reason people can't afford their kids' lunch is because of the growth of government. Until you rein that in, you will continue to have problems. So although those things sound great, and they are, and they do help a lot of kids, you have to get to the root cause. And if you're not dealing with that, you will keep putting Band-Aids on top of a problem.
Time, Mike.
Thank you.
Sorry.
At this point, we will remind everybody in the room to please be courteous to each other. We're trying to do our best to get the information out to everybody to make informed decisions, so just a gentle reminder on that. Thank you.
Okay, so question 4, and we will start with you, Ron. What is your position on the paid family leave January 1st, 2026? We have the Minnesota pregnancy and parenting leave as of August 1st, 2024.
So that bill, the costs have yet to come in, and they're already, in fact, it hasn't even been implemented, especially in the schools yet. My position on that right now is, what's it going to cost? It's already law. It's not going to get repealed. So how are we going to deal with the cost? Because that's really what's in front of us now. And how are we going to continue to pay for what's already in place? I think that you're going to see very tight budgets on this. You're going to see school districts already, if you look at their budgets, they're already talking about their deficits. And this hasn't even been implemented on top of that yet. So I go back to my original statement. We're going to have a November forecast. We're going to have a February forecast. This law is in place, and it's either going to have to be repealed, which I don't think is going to happen to save the costs, or we're going to have to pay for it. And in order to pay for it, where's it going to come out of? We've already talked about veterans benefits. We've already talked about Social Security tax. We've already talked about rural EMS, nursing homes. You can only spend $1 once, and this is going to be an expensive program. So that's the position that whatever legislators are seated in the first part of January are going to have to deal with.
I think that this is a key reason why we need balance at the legislature the next 2 years. This piece of legislation wasn't ready for prime time when it passed. Then they came back this last year in 2024 to bring fixes to it. And in the meantime, if I remember correctly, it went up by another $500 million in cost from 2023 to 2024. And when I say that cost, that's not the cost to Minnesota state government. That is the cost that is passed on to you all. That is the cost that you pay either as an employee or through the increased cost of the products, goods, and services that you are purchasing every single day. Every single day. Originally, it was a 0.7% payroll tax. Now, I believe it's about 0.85%. And as we move forward, other states that have passed similar legislation have seen these costs continue to balloon. So at what point are we all in this room and across the state going to be fed up with the increased cost of products, goods, and services, of gas, of groceries, of energy bills, healthcare costs, and the like? That's the question before us. At what point are you going to say the government isn't the one that can best solve these problems, and instead put the ingenuity to work within private industry to make this work for every given employer so that they can find the plan that best suits them and their employees? That's the way that this should work. But heavy-handed mandates don't work. And that's why we're seeing budget shortfalls across the board from school districts to county governments and beyond because of heavy-handed, one-size-fits-all mandates that don't fit us best.
On the surface, paid family leave seems like a pretty good idea. You know, I mean, if you hate to be a woman and go to the hospital, have a baby, and have to get back to work the next day, that would be terrible. So this, in theory, this makes sense. But, again, there are the costs, and the costs are unknown at this point, and we're just gonna have to wait and see how it unfolds. Thank you.
There was the comments made about school, how it affects schools. My biggest issue, or what I look at more, is the private sector, industries, business. Small businesses make up a huge percent of the employees across our state. Paid family medical leave, well, and an interesting fact as well, about 80% of those businesses had some sort of thing in place to take care of a emergency, pregnancy. There was systems there. There was also a private option that was presented, which was shot down. So those things are something that we have already in place, could have put private sector in instead of having government control. So it's meant with the small businesses. And a lot of times we see small businesses, it's an organic growth. A lot of times you're hiring friends, you're hiring family, you're hiring people you know. Those businesses take care of each other. If you're not family and you're 10 employees or less, a lot of times, they're taking care of each other. But when government says, you have to do this, you have to subsidize these things, it could have been done. It used to be a benefit that employers would offer to their employees. Now it's mandated. Anytime you mandate something like that, the costs which were mentioned, it's 0.7% before, and I believe it's almost 9 now. I think you're
It's approaching 9, yeah.
Approaching 9. By the time it's implemented, we're looking at much higher than that. Every regulation, every tax you put on small businesses gets passed through to the employees. One way or another, you're putting this on the burden of the employees. That means less money they're going to have in their pocketbooks. So one of the things that I always look at when we talk about taxes, I hope I'm not running out of time because I want to get this in, is I did an interview with the paper and they said, you know, you have a lot of the same policies that a lot of the Republicans, sorry, I'm out of time. I'll hit it on the next question.
Julia?
Well, first of all, we're coming out of pandemic, and it's our job to rescue each other, and that means investing in each other. We need to stimulate our economy, and we also need to stimulate our economics to pull us out of this recession, out of the pandemic, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I'll still go back to my original argument about when you invest, it returns you fivefold, tenfold, but it's a long-term investment. And that's what we owe our children and our grandchildren. And to leave them with a legacy that what did we do when all these families, we are all struggling and coming out of this pandemic and having these high inflation and everything else? But we are starting to see this, the mechanism starting to work, like wages are coming above or rising above inflation and so forth. We're seeing the grocery prices going down. They were as high, they were up over 25%. Car repairs were the highest, inflation-wise. They were up 54%. And this was all due to the pandemic and loss of income and so forth. And it's our job to stimulate and to help people to recover. And I'm a believer in promoting and offering tax breaks and credits to reduce the operating costs of small businesses and promoting workforce development programs to
Time.
enhance.
All right, next question. What is your position on expanding the DNR budget? I will ask that again. What is your position on expanding the DNR budget? And we will start with Isaac.
I dare you say you're going to expand it.
There's one thing that I know, traveling across and talking to the tremendous constituents in House District 10B, I don't hear a whole lot of support for expanding the DNR's budget, and I would not vote to do so. The DNR experienced the largest increase in their budget over the last 2 years that they've ever seen in the history of the state. If I'm remembering correctly, and I served on the House Environment and Natural Resources Committee with direct jurisdiction over the DNR, if I'm remembering correctly, it was a $300 million increase to the DNR's budget in the last 2 years. When we look at that, there's no reason for us to be doing that. Like a massive increase. Now let's just take this quickly back to the state budget and remember that with that nearly $20 billion budget surplus that we had, and as state government grew and 2,000 new state agency employees were added, that total state spending went up by 40% in one budget cycle. It's wholly unsustainable, it's wrong, and on top of it, state government still isn't delivering to the people of Minnesota with the additional money that they've been given. Whether it's on permits, whether it is on studies, whether it is on a whole host of different accountability measures, the DNR has failed many Minnesotans and isn't accountable with the amount of money that has been given to them. So I do not support any increase in the DNR's budget, and frankly, if we have a budget deficit, we're going to have to trim the DNR's budget.
I'm not too sure, I followed what Isaac was saying there, but as far as the budget goes for the DNR right now and the increases they got. But I do need to say this, that there needs to be more spending on chronic wasting disease for our deer population in our areas. We're not affected yet, but it's coming, and I will support more funding for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to make that part of my answer very quick. I would not support more spending for the DNR. Every time you take money and expand a government agency, it's done so on the backs of the taxpayers. And what this means, and like I was just going to, I'll tie this into my last statement that I got cut off from. I ran out of time. I was doing an interview with the paper, and they said, well, your answers sound a lot like typical Republican answers. And I thought, this is wrong, because then I'm not articulating the message well enough. What does it mean when we take more money from the people? What's the cause and effect of this? We restrict the freedoms of our citizens. The freedoms to do with your income what you see best. The freedom to support your family. And you give that up to government. You take the freedom of buying your own kids' lunch, because every one of your kids is different. Every one of your kids has a different menu that they want to have. My 15-year-old boy is not going to eat the same as my 10-year-old daughter. And if I have a son or daughter that has health restrictions, I don't need a school lunch for them. I, as a parent, should have the freedom to decide. But when government says we're going to take this bureaucracy and we're going to apply it to everyone, then it causes problems. So when I say we have to cut taxes, we have to cut the bureaucracy, what I'm saying is I believe in the freedom of the individual to do it best with their fruits of their labor, to decide for them what they want out of life. So what you have here is a diametrically opposed position where government is the solution to all your problems on one hand, and I believe that the individual is the solution to their problems. We can get out of the problems that we have. I believe we need to get government out of the way so that people, once again, take and control their destiny.
Julia?
I generally, being a hunter and conservationist, I'm all for the DNR. However, I do have my gripes too, because I'm not happy about the catch and release on Lake Mille Lacs, and how they're handling that. I think one of the underlying issues of the DNR is they have a conflict in their mission statement, because they're in charge of all of our natural resources, which means mining. And there's a conflict there, and there's money going there, and because I'm a new candidate, I still don't understand where all that money sits within there. But that's my first observation, is that they are in conflict, because they're trying to promote mining and trying to promote natural resources. And anyway, so there's, but for generally speaking, where there again, if we're investing in our environment, our sustainability, our future, then that will return dividends over the long run. And this talk about spending right now, that is considered an investment, because it will come back to you in many different values, not only in the well-being of your community, but in your profit and loss of your cities, your towns, your townships, your businesses. And so I would still, if I'm elected, I would certainly look at that in more detail and have other conservation groups included in that whole discussion of where are the needs, or where are the greatest needs. That's how we need to funnel those funds to. That is going to return and not be a waste. Thank you.
Ron?
Okay, thank you. So the simple question is, would you expand it? No. I'm going to start there, because that's not our job. Our job at the legislature is, first of all, oversight and to set budgets. So the first thing, and I don't care which agency it is, you can take all of them. The number one job, if I'm elected, and let's say that the House majority goes to the GOP and we get gavels, the number one job I'm going to have, if I'm lucky enough to be in, is to call the agency in and say, start justifying your budget, because that's our job. And I do this in my business, I do it in my personal finances. Just because is not a reason to spend more money. So bring your budget in, let's have a conversation. What's working, what's not working? There are many, many jobs in all of the agencies, and the DNR is one of them, that have been unfulfilled for 2 years. Why are we still budgeting for those? Obviously, those needs weren't so important because we'd have found those jobs to be filled. Our number one job is to put a budget together and pass it within the first year so that we have a 2-year biennium. So I'll take the tact of, let's just assume that I've already been the education lead. Let's say I have the education committee. The Department of Education is going to come in front of us, and they're going to just start justifying their budget. And we're going to start with a zero-based budget and say, here's where you are. And then I'm going to start looking for ways to cut, because I believe every agency can find ways to cut. We just don't have those conversations. And every single year, here's what I hear: just because we need to raise this. There is no program that's called just because. We don't get to raise the budgets just because that's what we've always done. So, frankly, I would be starting with a 10% cut across the board. Work your way back up to zero.
Thank you.
Okay, so question 6, and we will start with you, Greg. Currently, the state of Minnesota gives a $1,000 tax credit or a $3,000 tax deduction for 529 plan contributions. Would you support increasing these incentives to save for post-secondary schooling to incentivize Minnesota residents to help save for their kids' tuition costs, which increase annually by 5.5%?
I would support this 100%. It'll help families out. College isn't, or universities aren't the same as it was when I got my degree. I mean, it's the astronomical, the cost of sending a kid to school. My daughter, just as COVID hit, went to University of Arizona, and it was a $20,000 tuition. That paid for my That cost of that semester paid for my entire college degree. It's unsustainable the way the education has gone up, and I do feel education is very important to everyone. Thank you.
Mike? Sure.
Currently, the state of Minnesota gives a $1,000 tax credit or a $3,000 tax deduction for the 529 plan contributions. Would you support increasing these incentives to save for post-secondary schooling to incentivize Minnesota residents to help save for their kids' tuition costs, which increase annually by 5.5%?
Pretty sure we passed a bill last year that said if you made less than $80,000, you get free education. So, with that being said, there is things already in place to help education, and we have a problem with our higher education system right now, too. When you make everything free, it minimizes the value of it as well. And this is a problem. We've also taken higher education and made it, it is a higher calling, I'll say that. Not everyone is cut out for higher education. And we see a lack of emphasis on the post-secondary, which I think is to the detriment. We've seen, just the trades have seen a huge off-fall. We don't have enough people to fill those positions. We don't have enough training. The higher education and the colleges have done a very good job of marketing their product and saying that you have to you're going to make more money by going to a four-year college. Alex Tech recently put out an interesting statistic that said the first 20 years, their graduates make more than a four-year degree. That's phenomenal. So do we need to invest? We need our kids to have some training to figure out what they want in school too. We've lost some of the VOTech training that was in school, some of the shop classes, welding and so forth. So when we have kids now that are graduating and are kind of rudderless, not sure in what they want to do out of life because they've never had those experiences. When I grew up, when I was a kid, you had the opportunity, just about everybody did. If you didn't live on a farm, you went and worked on a farm, or you had a job in town. And those things piqued your interest to figure out what you wanted to do later in life. We've also regulated those things so much that it's almost impossible to hire a young person out on the farm or in some of the businesses. So we've really put our students at a disadvantage when they're trying to figure out what they want to do later on in life. And that affects the education, the higher ed. Thank you.
Do I support the tax credits and so forth? I would say yes. But along with what Mike is saying, we also need to focus more on our high school work programs. And there are several that are happening, and we need to expand on those more because college is not made out for everybody, and that is a myth that that everybody needs a college degree. That's not true. When I got, a lot of us didn't have college degrees when we got our first job, but we worked long and then we went to night school or whatever and to get that, but those years of experience make a difference. I'm mostly concerned that that we expand on those high school programs. And yes, we need to get a handle on the cost of college. But yeah, too, we all know that the legislature passed a 2-year education tuition, free tuition. And that can happen in a lot of, especially the 4-year colleges are starting to offer more as far as, I want to say, the first 2 years of, and helping to be in conjunction with the community colleges and to be able to promote those kinds of programs and to help lower the tuition. But we have given them, our students, $2,000 to get to those, or I shouldn't say 2,000. Thank you, time's up.
So,
Talk too slow.
so thanks for the question. This is the complicated nature of being elected in the state government. You have to ask why. What's the problem? And as I listen to this question, we're trying to address two problems. Tuition continues to rise, or is the problem that we're not saving enough, families are not saving enough for college? First of all, and I don't think this one addresses either one of those. So why are we doing this? Do we want to bring down the cost of tuition? Okay, let's figure that out, or guess what? I have kids that are going to college. You can choose the school you get to go to. Everything's full disclosure. You're going to find that out. It's not our job as legislators to figure out where families send their kids to school. Now let's go to the other side. Should families save for college? Absolutely. But we don't get to control that. Had the governor delivered on his promise of $2,000 or more for families, they could have directed that in there. We can't control behavior. We can pass a budget. If families want to save more for college, there's nothing right now that prevents them from putting more money into that except for their own budget. So as I look at this, it's one of those things. Why? What's not working? People are going to have to make those choices.
Getting back to the question about the 529 plan, that program has existed in Minnesota, I believe, for about 22 years. I'm sure that program has probably fallen a little bit flat in recent years because of, number one, the fact that if you or your family makes less than $80,000 a year, you can go to college for free. Now, that program, if I'm remembering correctly, isn't paid for into the future, so I'm not quite sure that is going to find or meet the muster as we move forward, especially with the tight state budget. But when we look at this, I appreciate a lot of the comments that have been made across the desk here because we don't know what our kids want to go into. But at the end of the day, right now in Minnesota and across House District 10B, families are crunched all the way across the board, especially for just the common things, the common utilities and the common grocery bill and paying for housing and all of those different aspects that, frankly, people aren't putting away for their retirement, let alone putting away for their kids' college education. And so this seems like something that's a little bit more aspirational than it is nuts and bolts of the economy that we're living in today. I mean, the vast majority of families across our area are both parents are having to work to make ends meet. And the median household income in House District 10B is around $80,000. And I'm sure that that's from families who have two-parent working households. So we need to focus upon the things that are going to benefit the people in their everyday lives today. And they can make their own plans for their future.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our next question, and Mike, you will start on this. What needs to be done to address the lack of affordable housing in many rural communities?
It's an issue that's not just rural communities, but it's across the state and across the nation. And it's been something that's going on for quite a while. In Minnesota here specifically, we've created some of these issues. If you look at, and I always forget the city that's on the Minnesota side, but right across is Hudson, Wisconsin. It cost us about $25,000 more to build that same house in Minnesota as it does in Wisconsin, due to regulations and other expenses. Now, if we're going to solve these problems, we have to figure out why it costs more in Minnesota to build, first of all, and then address some of those issues first. Because if we're priced out of the markets, those people are going to build across the river. So once again, you have to go back to the root cause of the issue. Housing is a starter home in the 1970s, I believe it was right around 1,200 feet, give or take, and took up about 15 to 20% of your income to afford. Now, a starter home in the United States is about 2,700 square feet. It's over doubled. And $480,000 is the cost of the average home, something like that is what the statistics are. So we've priced this out of most people's budgets. Builders don't want to build starter homes. The other thing that we have in our population is a shift in the housing. We have a lot of elderly that live in the home. We used to have a statistic of about 5 to 6 people per household, and our average right now is less than 3. So we haven't really changed the number of houses so much, but we have less people per house, which is creating some of these issues too. So how do we come up with solutions? And Todd, I wish we had 3 minutes instead of 2. I'm sorry, I run out of time.
We'll put that in the notes for next year's, next forum.
Okay, thank you. To support economic growth in the rural Minnesota, a combination of targeted economic stimulus measures are essential. This could include investment in infrastructure development to improve transportation and connectivity, providing financial incentives for businesses to establish or expand operations in our rural areas, offering tax breaks or credits to reduce operating costs, and promoting workforce development programs to enhance skills and attract talent. Additionally, supporting local entrepreneurs, fostering innovation, expanding access to affordable health care and child care services can further stimulate economic activity and lower costs for businesses in rural cities and counties. The housing, and I came across this today that was sent to me from the DFL, that the First Generation Homebuyer Loan Program, down payment assistance up to $35,000 for first home buyers, and this includes owned a home but lost it due to foreclosure. This is opening a lot of doors, but the problem is inventory. We don't have enough inventory for that, and I'd love to share more about this program. And you can even get up to $53,000 that would include closing costs and so forth if you qualify. Bottom line is that housing is an essential to our every child, adult, and elderly. Affordability and inventory are overarching issues throughout the housing system. Housing crisis in Minnesota, Housing Agency has answered this with this new program. Everyone needs to have a table, needs to be at the table, and no solution left off the table.
Time.
Government can't fix everything. And the biggest thing that I see, you see a $20 billion budget that the surplus was spent. $1 billion of that was put into housing. All this was going to be solved. We're still talking about it. If you go back to the 2008 and the collapse of subprime market, the idea coming out of the late 1990s where everyone should own a house, so they reduced the regulations for banking. Anybody could get a home, even though they didn't qualify for the credit. And what happened? The market collapsed on itself. We had banks buying up loans, reselling those in the market. It was the subprime. I'll go back to the statement. The only job we have as legislators is to pass a budget. We're not going to solve this at a state legislative level. It just can't. It's a supply and demand problem. If we're going to have the inventory and people are going to move in through those homes, a state budget's not going to fix that. We're not going to change the behavior of people as they're trying to buy their homes. And it's hard. We need to pass a budget and then get out of the way and let the supply and demand work itself out. What we can't do is put our thumb on this, start playing around. I think the most uncompassionate thing we could do as legislators is put young people in more debt with all these great programs. Hey, let's just take out more money. Let's just do lower interest rates. All we're really doing is saddling them with debt. Why would we do that? Debt is not the answer to young families that are trying to get into a home and trying to move up.
I think that Ron hit on a lot of great points there, and why it's not the role of state government to seek to meddle in trying to artificially inflate this market. But the things that state government does control or has at least some role in are things like natural resource management. We have forests that, frankly, we aren't harvesting the amount of wood that would be the 100% of the allowable sale. And so when we look at that impacts the amount of supply of building materials. In addition to that, what has happened over the last 2 years on energy policy has only made energy more expensive, and for the future to look a little bit more uncertain for each and every one of us when we're pushing towards this, 100% from renewable energy sources like wind and solar. That's going to drive up the costs of energy across the board. We're going to feel that very soon if we're not feeling that already, and it's going to impact housing prices as well. When you're talking about how we stack up versus our neighbors, it's a black and white contrast between the states around us on the sorts of mandates that we place on all industry, on all employers. And so when we're passing these mandates, whether it's on workforce, whether it's on building codes, whether it's on energy, the mandates come with a very hefty price tag that get added to the total cost of a given home. There was several bills this last legislative session that were going to add very hefty price tags to the tune of thousands of dollars to every new build, based upon an idea that every new home needed to be fitted for electric vehicles. Very expensive. Very, very expensive.
Well, I feel that to solve part of the problem, not all of it, in District 5B, is basically inventory a situation. Like Mike mentioned earlier, you got 10-bedroom houses that only have 1 or 2 people living in them right now. There are seniors that are aging in place. Now, there are some seniors that don't want to age in place in the rural areas because they can't maintain their houses. They need senior housing. There is a shovel-ready project in Eagle Bend. It's called the Hilltop Senior Apartment Complex. It's just waiting for fundings. It lost funding last time by 1 point. If that gets approved and gets off the ground, that'll free up some other houses if the seniors choose to move there. And then it'll allow young people to take over those houses and solve some of the housing project. It won't solve it all, but we got to start somewhere. In this project, the Hilltop Seniors Center, it's shovel ready and should be good to go. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're on to question 8, and Julia, we will start with you. What do you feel are the most pressing issues facing rural businesses?
I'll have to use 30 seconds to find my notes. Well, I can speak off the top of my head because it's housing. Housing is one of the top issues. Of course, inflation, cost of living, and childcare. Those, I believe, are a lot just aimed at, when you're talking just about small businesses. The other issue is finding people and incentivizing people. In Aiken, for instance, there's a couple of business owners that I know that struggled. They have workers driving in from Anoka just because they can't find a place to live. And there are certain things now, like Garrison, they're proposing to transform the old motel into to share with small business and childcare. And there are places in Wilmer that are they're doing nice programs with childcare. They're setting up pods. They're rehabilitating, that's not the right word, renovating cabins and old houses and things like that, and utilizing that for that space. And that is growing that's growing the economy. That's growing the community. But yeah, inflation is coming down, and it's And like I said, wages are rising above inflation. And we've seen job growth but it's being able to give like I said earlier, about promoting more tax credits and incentives for small businesses that will bring down their operating cost. And then once they get going, here we are again. I just talked too long.
Stop passing bills. Frankly, that's what we do. When you get into business, the number one thing you're trying to do is reduce risk. And when bills start floating around, it creates uncertainty, it creates risk, and people don't know. Let me give you a prime example. Look at the fiasco we did with Uber and the shared drivers. If Minneapolis wanted to pass a bill and they wanted to try to do all that to the Uber and Lyft drivers, let them. They have a city council. We did not need to get in the middle of that. That became a huge debacle, and all that we did was raise the cost of ride share for consumers. Uber and Lyft are going to do just fine. Minneapolis is going to do just fine, but the consumers got kicked in the teeth. We cannot keep creating these uncertain situations and passing bill after bill. When you start up a business, we all know, and if those of you that are entrepreneurs, I don't care if you're in agriculture or the service industry, business is risky and you can fail. You have to accept that. But the greatest way that you can get past that is knowing the landscape, knowing how to get rid of uncertainty so that you can figure out how to pay your employees, how to build into profits so you can invest and keep going. That's what business is about. When government gets in the way, people stop expanding their businesses because of risk. So I'm serious. We need to stop passing bills. We need to stop threatening businesses and treating them like they're the enemy. They're not. They're building employee bases. They're helping people get into homes, and we're helping them thrive as business owners. So let's just get out of their way.
Yeah, the top answer here is just to get government out of our pocket and off our back. That's the top thing that business owners, and not just business owners, but all employers can really use because of what we've seen over the last few years. It just becomes more and more challenging. Our entire community here is based upon, honestly, many Main Street family small businesses. And every time a new mandate is added, it's a ton just for a currently operating business to learn the new system, the new way to operate. And it comes at immense cost. It oftentimes means they have to hire a new person. It oftentimes means a big-time cost that they're going to have to pass on to consumers. I mean, frankly, one of the most eye-opening moments for me over the last few months was when one of our area, Morrison County accounting and HR firms kind of brought me in and said, hey, how are we supposed to navigate earned sick and safe time and paid family medical leave? And frankly, how am I supposed to communicate that to a 72-year-old farmer who employs seasonal help, and each of his seasonal helpers or workers is going to cause them to be needing to be accounted for? These sorts of mandates really don't suit us well, especially, and it could be a circumstance of someone who is just someone working a summer help for a landscaping company, and the burden that is, it can legitimately increase the cost of that person working by almost 50% of what they're getting paid. But that money isn't going in the pocket of the employee. No, that's the weight that is on the business.
I feel the biggest thing for businesses that are pressing is obviously the cost of doing business. Since COVID, the business that I am in, the suppliers have raised the cost 50%. That's hard to keep up with, and there's a point where the consumers are not buying it anymore. So that's one problem. Another problem in my district is worker shortage because of the lack of housing. Like somebody mentioned, there was someone was shipping people in from Anoka or wherever, It is happening in our district. We need more housing to get our workers there, and our employers and our businesses will thrive more. Most of them are operating on skeleton crews, and you can't operate like that forever. You end up getting burned out. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more than with what Ron said earlier. Stop passing bills. As a new legislator, you have a lot of people that come into your office and want to talk to you, and it seems like both sides of the aisle, business people, business experts, lobbyists, said, stop. Just simply stop. It was too much the last 2 years. We have to stop passing more laws. So that's huge. The housing for Eagle Bend was brought up, and I guess I'll probably take credit for that. There was $1.4 million that had been set aside by bonding by my predecessor, and we threw a technical change. We got that changed. It was supposed to be demolished. That 1.4 million, 1.5 million is going to get spent on fixing that building. So thanks for bringing that up. I can take credit for that. I appreciate it. Trying to go fast because I want to cover everything. Childcare in the state of Minnesota, 50% of the daycares that we've lost in Minnesota is simply because of legislation. 10 or 12 years ago already, this happened where more legislation was put on and in-home daycares were crushed. Now, this year alone, there was another 60 or 95 pages of mandates that were going to get put on daycares. So we have crushed that industry. And then to say that we need to come up with solutions that we're dealing with the problems, well, we created the problems. Government created the problems. So how do we get out of the way and just let people do their jobs? Housing in Todd County, that was one thing on the Planning and Zoning Board I thought they did very well. Temporary family housing. So if you have a parent that's living in the house and somebody else wants to buy it, you can put a temporary family house next to the structure, hook it up to the existing sewer system, small home under 1,280 feet, I think it was, and your parent could live in there or somebody could live in there in the meantime. Those are simple solutions that don't cost money, that don't create more regulations, and can take care of some of the problems we have. Just get government out of the way, we can fix the problems. I gotta speak faster, I guess.
You're getting there.
All right, we'll move on to our next question, and we will start with Ron on this one. What are key issues facing transportation in Minnesota?
I don't know, we kind of screwed up Uber and Lyft. I already talked about that. I mean, I don't know. I think the biggest thing on the transportation is, and I support bonding bills when we have infrastructure. And for rural Minnesota, the areas that we have, the biggest concern we have is making sure we have a solid infrastructure, whether that's bridges and roads. And frankly, that's constitutionally what we're supposed to be doing, is putting that infrastructure in place. So I've been a big supporter of that, and I'm all about infrastructure. So when we get to transportation, I'll look for solutions along those lines.
Yeah, there's a lot that has changed here in the last couple of years on transportation too. We need to have something that is long-term secure funding for our roads and bridges. One thing that sticks out to me right now is that today, people who drive electric vehicles that are heavier than a gas-powered vehicle, they're not paying their fair share on the roads across the state. They don't pay the gas tax that we all pay. In addition, this last legislature increased the gas tax and indexed that to inflation. So it's going to hit harder for those of us who drive gas-powered vehicles, all the while electric vehicles are definitely using our roads for a lot lower cost. In addition, unfortunately, in the bill passed these last 2 years, they are spending gobs of money on a train to Duluth. $200 million, I believe, is what the state's share of it is, or something close to that. And that's a misplaced priority compared to the rural needs that we have, right? There's probably very few of us in this room who will ever see the benefit to that cost. All the while, people right now are traveling between Minneapolis and Duluth in buses and doing just fine. And frankly, you can move the routes of a bus to meet the needs, whether it's to the Twin Stadium or to the airport or to some other transit hub. If you build a train between Minneapolis and Duluth, we're all going to pay for that, and ultimately it's going to be stuck along the corridor that it's built. So it's especially disappointing because comparatively, those dollars could have been a big assistance to our local townships. And 70% of the people that I serve live in townships, and unfortunately, these last 2 years did not treat our townships very well.
Greg?
I'm going to agree with Ron on this. Transportation and infrastructure should be done looking at solutions in the legislation. Thank you.
Mike?
All right, transportation. I'll slow down because I want to make sure everybody hears me. Our bonding was the one thing we were supposed to do last year. The governor said, we're going to get a bonding bill passed. And when it was all said and done, we had a cash bonding bill. I mean, it wasn't done. What we were supposed to do there this year was not done. Bonding is an interesting thing. It's supposed to be for roads, bridges, infrastructure. It is supposed to take care of what we have in place. Also, there's some of it supposed to be spent on, state buildings, maintenance and upkeep. But now, what we have and what happens a lot of times is special projects, which for me is a really frustration. And I constantly refer to the rugby field in Anoka. An $18 million, I think it was Anoka, I'm going to pick on them anyways. An $18 million rugby field in Anoka is not a need. That is not something we need to be spending money on. I think our bonding bill, our infrastructure should probably be broke down into 3, maybe 4 different parts and vote on each of those parts: roads and bridges, water, infrastructure, and then some of the pet projects. And there's some varying degrees. I've talked to different people about different ideas how to do it. But let's spend money the way we're supposed to, the way we were intended, not on the fun projects that seem to get used to get people votes. We see this so many times where contentious races end up with more bonding money. And St. Cloud is a prime example. $100 million of projected infrastructure spend bonding money, and that is a contentious area. Could go right, could go left. But you see more money funneled to those areas, I call it campaign fodder, and it doesn't serve the people of the whole state. That's why I think we need to break this up. Thank you.
Julia?
And the issue is about transportation. What are the issues facing transportation? And again, I'm at the mercy of the candidates that have been in the legislature. They know the details, and they know the details more. What's the saying about the devil's in the details? Well, it's more about what the people want and what the and where the money is going to return the most to the community and to us as constituents. There's, we hear a lot of all these programs have waste and fraud and abuse, but that's just a small percentage. When it comes to transportation, it's just like any other business where you have to look at it from where, why are we doing this? And what are going to be the benefits? What is the payback? Now keep in mind, government is not for profit. Government is here to help people and to raise up our communities and to be their net and to support them and nurture them and comfort them. Corporations are for profit, and that's a whole nother issue where the price gouging that went on in groceries and everything else. Oh, it's already up already? Oh, I just get going.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move into our next question. We're going to start with Isaac on this, and we have been asked to come back to that first question that was given regarding some of the veterans' issues, and I'm going to do my best to make sure I get this correct, I promise. So the first part of it had dealt with the burial equity resolution that Representative Krisha had got in. So again, supporting that. Second was regarding the disabled veterans property tax exclusion, which does exist. We're talking about raising it, increasing it, and potentially, and I hope I'm reading this right, potentially tying it to inflation. Yes? Okay, thank you. And then the third item again was the hunting and fishing licenses for disabled veterans. And the impact would be approximately $160,000 in a budget of $1 billion. So I'm asking us to kind of go back to that. And now that we have a little more information, I hope that makes sense to everybody, and we will happily repeat this if need be. And we will start with Isaac on this one.
I answered yes to it before, but you added the tied to inflation thing. I disagree with setting things on autopilot without a sunset in state policy. It's not a great path for us to be on. Though when we voted on the property tax exclusion, it was this last spring. It passed off of the floor of both bodies, and John Ulrich was there when that happened, and the board lit up green for that. So, and that was one of the more momentous moments of the last 2 years, where there was a large amount of bipartisan support, and yet it didn't get done for reasons that I don't think many of us in this room will ever really understand. But, I would just say, I'm not going to commit to indexing that to inflation, only because we need to be clear about all of our different things that we're looking at. But I did vote for the increase to the property tax exclusion.
Greg?
Well, I answered yes on all three, and I'm just going to reiterate yes on all three of them again. It should be tied to inflation. The hunting and fishing is definitely important to disabled veterans. My brother has a piece of property in District 5B where he sponsors disabled veterans. They come out in their wheelchairs. They have an opportunity to hunt. They can bow hunt. They can turkey hunt, whatever they want to do there. They are free to do it, and it's free of charge. And this is something that I personally support and will always support. Thank you.
Mike?
There's not a lot of things when it comes to the House that we have heavy bipartisan support on, but Isaac was exactly right. When it came to the vet issues, it's amazing to see so much support. The inflation part of it, I guess I would have to agree as well, that there's contingencies there, there's always things that need to be looked at, and I think it needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. I would have an issue with that, tying it to inflation, just because I think things change, and we constantly need to be on top of them. But it is an amazing thing when there is so much division, so much disagreement, but when it comes to the vet bills, when it comes to those votes, and to see that board green, that's kind of an amazing thing, and I appreciate it. So once again, support.
Again, I support all three items concerning our vets. And tying their property tax increases to cost of living increases, inflation, in other words. We do that in, Social Security does that. I mean, and we complain that it's not enough. So I would think that would be a fair way of being able to control the spending for this, is to tie it to inflation. So we set a number, and just like we get in Social Security. We have, we put in and we get a certain amount back, and it's tied to inflation. I think it should be the same. I think that is more fair than giving it over to the legislature to bicker and moan and groan and complain that they're not getting what they want. This isn't about what they want. This is about what you want, what our veterans want, what we need. And I just beg you to understand that these are investments that return more than money to you. They return health and joy and togetherness. And I'm getting angry thinking about it because we have too much anger and anxiousness in our society right now. And a lot of it is caused because of these attitudes. And I mean, you look at our children, the suicide rate in the past few years has skyrocketed, but it's up 10%. The Native American suicide rate is up 40%. I mean, how much more do we need to say that that our people need help? And it's investing in those kinds of programs that will help.
So going back, and thank you for the circle back on the question of this, but tying it to inflation just doesn't make sense. And here's why. Because the issues change. And everybody comes into the legislature, and I hear them coming in front of the committee, everybody wants to be tied to inflation. But nobody ever wants to recognize the fact that when we have negative inflation, we're going down. Nobody ever says, hey, let's truly tie it to inflation and go up and down. Here's the reason why I couldn't support putting this tied to inflation. It doesn't address the homeless issue. It doesn't address the fact that we have not enough beds for vets that need to be in our VAs and our homes. We just thankfully got a new home built up in Bemidji. We've been working a long time on that. Representative Matt Bliss got that passed. But just tying it to inflation, we can't tie the hands of future legislatures because things change. We have to recognize the problems that are in front of us, and we have to solve those as they come up. And I think that by tying it to inflation, you're taking away from the very, very many other issues that could be held on the veteran side. So I don't support tying things to inflation across the board. Did I mention I want to cut everything 10%? I can go back to that.
All right. So again, thanks for all the submitted questions. So we're just going to take a quick breather here so we can move into closing statements by all of the candidates, and we'll give you 3 minutes for each. How's that sound? Okay?
Uh-oh.
You really want to hear from us?
Uh-oh. Really?
Every minute of it, Ron. Every minute, yes.
That's what we got. That's 20 minutes of us talking.
Not that bad. All right. And so we'll start with closing statements. Down on the end with Greg. Go ahead when you're ready.
And again, thank you for having us here. It was a great evening. Thanks for the audience that showed up. It was great to see you here. In conclusion, I'm not going to take the whole 3 minutes, but if given a chance, I am capable and willing to do the job. Please vote for me November 5th. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to come to the candidate forums to discuss ideas, topics. I think it's great. I had never really pictured myself in this position, and yet here I am because it's one of the great things of our country. You don't have a qualification necessarily for some of these positions. You simply have to raise your hand and say, I think I can do this, and the people have to make the decision. Do you think that this person can do it or not? I'm honored to have them put their faith in me the last 2 years. It's a big responsibility. And I take that viewpoint that I work for the people. I absolutely do. Whether it's not just my family that's in my area, but it's friends, colleagues, everyone else, I'm their voice down at the Capitol. Sometimes there's hard decisions. And I have to look at the area and say, this is what I feel best based on my education, experience, time down at the Capitol, and to be that voice. This position is something more than I had ever expected. The challenges of the last 2 years were overwhelming. And the legislation and what's taken place, and I was interviewed, I think I sat down with NPR, or one of those more liberal-leaning discussions, and they said they had never seen legislation or sessions like the last 2 years. How does that serve the people of our area? How does that serve the people of the state? Balance has been mentioned many times. Common sense was brought up many times. And we've gotten away from some of that. I think in our state we can do better. We need to have those discussions. We need to have some, and I don't mind if they get heated. At the same time, when we have this divide in our state right now, especially urban metro, or urban rural, when we saw that the voice of Greater Minnesota was trampled on in a lot of committee meetings, on the floor, that's disappointing to me, because every piece of legislation that we do, every single one, affects everyone in the whole state. And every piece of legislation that we do can have a positive impact as well as a negative impact on others. If you cut taxes for one, it can mean the raising of taxes for another. More regulations for one business might open up regulations for another. Those things are heavy decisions, and there's so many things that I had never really contemplated until I got into this position. It's overwhelming. At the same time, I'm absolutely thrilled to do this. I'm thrilled to come to the forums to discuss the ideas that I think are important. And once again, I'm running out of time. So thank you. I appreciate your vote. Get out and vote November 5th. It's essential to our country. Thank you.
Julia?
I stand for progress. And I also believe in the values of hard work, integrity, and equity, and bring a unique blend of experiences as your state representative. My commitment lies in the supporting of people of Minnesota in achieving financial security and living lives of autonomy and dignity. This election is not just about policies, it's also about values and character. In the face of widespread challenges where many individuals are grappling with financial uncertainties and concerns about their way of living, I am determined to work towards solutions that promote well-being, resilience, and prosperity for all. As your state representative, I will fight for policies that build a stronger, more equitable Minnesota. Together, we can create a state where everyone, no matter where they live or what they do, has a fair shot at success. In this land of freedom and opportunity, let us embrace this new chapter with unity and determination. Now more than ever, we need leadership that is bold, compassionate, and focused on unity. Let's work together to continue this economic progress and make sure no one is left behind. Let's unite to move beyond the negativity. Together, we can secure a prosperous, a fair future for all Minnesotans. Vote for Julia Hipp for State Representative in District 10A, and let's build a brighter future for everyone. And together, we will thrive. Thank you for being here.
Ron?
So, thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to all the candidates that are up here. As I said, going down there and passing a budget in times of high uncertainty is going to be a very difficult job. I think that will be difficult no matter whoever gets back into power. This role requires thoughtfulness, deliberations, and being able to build relationship. Many of the same issues that we face here in Little Falls or Aiken or any of the communities I represent, small businesses also face those in downtown Minneapolis. There are small businesses and entrepreneurs trying to do exactly the same thing as our shops here, and they're also suffering from these. And we have a body of 134 members all trying to fight for their 40,000 representative people. And it's understanding that sometimes there's a give and there's a take as you work through this process. But I think that what we've lost our way on the most is the misinformation and the way we treat each other. I can disagree with somebody who represents an area of the state that I don't live in. I can also agree with that person and we can try to find compromise. But frankly, what I have witnessed over the last 16 months is a manipulation of people's emotions, Facebook posts and social media, and flat out lies, just for the gain of selfishness. This should not be a selfish job. Whoever takes the role, whoever wins the election, will have a very, very difficult job going into next year. And that's going to be hard. And setting that aside, the one thing that I recognize down there in the time that I've been, and it's been an honor to be this, is the people that come down there and think they've won something and that they're now at the top of their power are the people that do the worst job. It's the people that actually work for their district and try to get things done and don't do it so that they get a media spot or they get likes and views. Those are the folks that actually accomplish good things. So I hope that we can get back to that. I hope we can go back to the approach where we really can try to bring encouragement and set up a fair budget and not just beat up each other over stupid misinformation, because that's not working. So people's lives, I mean, we have human beings. This job deals with human beings every single day. And there are some really tough stories. There are some really tough situations. Child abuse is as rampant in Morrison County as it is in Hennepin and Ramsey. So.
Isaac?
First, thank you to each and every one of you for participating tonight through your questions and your attendance tonight. Each and every one of you in this room know how important a role yours is in the future of our country, of our state, and of our community. And it takes this level of civic involvement. And while we might feel like this is a small crowd tonight, think of the tens of thousands of people here in Morrison County that you represent by sitting in this room. We're grateful that you're here and sharing your questions, because I'm sure these are the questions that reverberate throughout each and every one of our communities where we live. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting. As we look forward to the future, let's seek to build a bold, bright vision for the future of our county, of our state, and truly be excited about it. Let's work towards a vision that allows each community to self-determine that which they want for their own community, and for the people who live there to be excited about the vision that they're pursuing. Let's lean away from heavy-handed, one-size-fits-all ideas that are trying to dictate the way that we live our lives. That's what we know in rural Minnesota, that we want to be able to live the lives that fit our families and our communities best. It's why we choose to live where we live, right? Many of us were born here, and this is what we know, and we love it. And yet there are people who come here and choose to make their home here. So let's be excited about what the future can look like and seeing the opportunities that we have if we get back on track as a state. From a values perspective, from a tax and regulatory environment perspective, from a way that we support one another. Let's continue to be the best version of ourselves individually, so that we're caring for our neighbors around us. And at the same time, building an economy where we can thrive, each and every one of us in the way that we want to. And hopefully along that journey, grow and see maybe the best decade ever in the history of Morrison County. We should be pursuing a vision like that allows our community to thrive and to make it a great place to live, work, play, raise a family, grow old, and everything in between. Let's do that together. So thank you for your involvement tonight. Once again, I'm Isaac Schultz, and I hope you all, I know each and every one of you here is going to vote next week. I don't even need to be worried about that. But have a great night, everybody.
Alrighty, well, we are going to conclude it because we have about 5 minutes left, so we wouldn't have had time for another question. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to Morrison County for allowing us to use this boardroom for this. Thank you to PERVA and our committee members. So that I'm very grateful we were able to do this. So everyone have a great night. Thank you.
I would assume so, yeah.
Just clarify that.